Unturned is presented by UpdateAI.
Every time a customer's like, what are you doing with AI? And I respond, I'm like, what particularly are you looking to solve for? Like, I have not once gotten a response to that. Like, they don't know, they just know it exists. Right? Like, that's
100% of the time.
Yeah.
Because they need to check their boxes that their tech stack has AI, but like, what does that even mean? What are you solving for? The breadth and depth of the responses, I agree with you. It's so shallow. Nobody knows what they want. They just know that they want something to be a better experience and to help them, but they don't know what they're seeking help around or what their expectations are around how your technology will even provide that.
100%. Especially for a CS team, like they're probably getting asked to do stuff from other parts of the company. Ask CSMs to do crap all the time, right? So you're just piling on.
Is that true at Client Success, Kristi? Do other parts of the company ask you guys to do stuff all the time? I feel like you probably like hold your ground over there.
Well,
hey everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Unturned. I'm Josh Schachter, your co-host with Kristi Faltorusso, not with John Johnson. It's one of those Mondays. He's multitasking, and his multitasks took the best of him. And Kristi just woke up from a nice 5-minute nap, but
it was 3 minutes because you guys interrupt me.
Well, because you texted me and you're like, I'll be there in 3 minutes. I'm taking a 3-minute nap. I'm like, well, then why the heck are you texting me right now?
John started bothering me. Like, I just wanted to
say happy birthday?
No,
really bothersome.
I was trying to go down for like a 17-minute nap. And then like, for some reason, my phone just kept going off with like questions about work and places I'm supposed to be and things I'm supposed to be doing. 17 minutes. That's all I wanted.
Sorry. It sucks to be important.
It does.
Well, happy birthday. I'm not going to sing it.
Thank you. But why?
Well, in my head, I just
If John was here, he would sing me happy birthday. I'm just saying.
And John is nicer and more musically talented.
It is true. On both fronts. Yes.
Yeah.
We're 100%
we have
accurate.
our guest today, Arit Nsemo, who is the Senior Director of CS at Searchspring. Did I get your pronunciation correct?
It's Arit Nsemo.
Oh, God. I was so close. I got the first name.
You did. You got the first name. You got half the battle.
Okay. Nsemo.
Yep.
Well, thank you for coming on to the show. We met in Chicago about 2 months ago, almost 3 months ago at this point, actually.
Yeah.
And you were telling us some amazing stuff that you do using AI to enable your strategy and yearly preparation of things. And then we got to introduce you to Kristi, who invited you to CS100 to speak last week in Utah. And you spoke about that and some other topics, I'm sure. So I want to start by talking about CS100 to both of you. You know, Kristi is the hostess with the mostest of this event every year. And we know it's like a hallmark event in the customer success industry. Got a lot of buzz. I just was on LinkedIn 20 seconds ago and I see somebody posting about it, and that's just all the feed these days, all the rage. So I don't want to talk to Kristi about CS100.
I was going to say, I don't want to talk about it because I'm super biased.
Yeah.
I want to hear from Arit, who also, this was her first CS100.
Exactly.
So that makes it even more special.
So what were you expecting going into CS100? Let's start with that.
So I'd heard a lot about it. I'd heard a lot about from the industry. I'd been wanting to go for years. It just never worked out scheduling wise. And so I had heard that it was like the unconference, like a conference, but not really, like more like summer camp for CS leaders. You make real connections with your peers. You learn a lot. You have actual takeaways and like tactical things you can do immediately. Whereas a lot of conferences, and like no shade to other conferences, but a lot of conferences are like very high level and like thought leadership by people who haven't worked in the industry in 20 years and are just kind of making things up, and it's like not super valuable, a little exhausting, frankly. So I like hate conferences. Like, I'm just going to say it. I don't like them. You have to like drag me to conferences. And my expectations were high because I had heard really good things about it, but I have a different conference like scale in my head. And it just didn't disappoint. Like, it was so incredible. The thing about genuinely making like real connections with people is true. Like I have best friends now. Like I'm like, okay, I have.
You've never had best friends in your life before?
Never before have I had best friends. No, honestly.
First best friend charms was split at this event.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I was telling my real life best friend since I was a freshman in college. I was like, oh, I made a couple of really good friends. And she's kind of jealous. And so she was like, excuse me? Like, who are these new people that you want to hang out with? All of a sudden, do they live in Chicago? Like, are you going to have to travel to see them? What's going on? She had so many follow-up questions. I was like, listen, there's plenty of room. But yeah, I've made really close connections, like tactical information. It was amazing.
Who's the closest connection that you made?
Oh my God, either Kristi, because I made it.
Because she's on the show right now.
And then...
I like to think that I facilitated some of these other friendships. So I'm going to see, I want to guess who your number 2 is. I have the name in my head. I want to see if I'm right.
Number 2 is Nisha, obviously.
Yep. Who I introduced you to your first day after check-in. At check-in.
Nisha who?
I walked in to register.
Nisha Baxi over at Gong. She leads their community.
Oh, yeah. So Nisha, of course. I know her. Yeah, she's great.
I fell in love with her at CS100 a couple of years ago. She was a speaker. And her and I became instant besties. So when Arit walked in, I had Nisha here. I was like, wait, hold on. The two of you, I was like, I love you both. So you two, I know will love each other. And I knew that was going to be a match made in heaven.
It was.
Or at CS100.
We started talking for the next several hours just about like all these challenges on our teams and life and everything. And it was amazing. It was amazing.
What about which presentation or which part of the event stuck out the most?
Okay, so first of all, there was a power outage, which was kind of incredible because I'm going to give you props here, Kristi. Like, you and your team just kept it rolling. Like, it was like we didn't miss out on any content. Like, we didn't get no loss of value. It was just like, power goes out, we're just going to keep on moving, which was incredible, very memorable. But I think in terms of the content, Janelle Friday did an amazing presentation on emotional awareness on teams. And that was super actionable because obviously CSMs tend to have there's a lot of stress and burnout and you are dealing with a lot of people's feelings and emotions all day long when you're talking to your customers. So that was super applicable. And then there was some really interesting stuff, honestly, from Dave Blake talking about the future of CS and where he sees CS 5.0. And then Kristi gave great insights about inserting AI into basically every layer of CS, which is obviously something I'm very interested in because if I can use something to help me do the things I don't want to do, I will do that all day long because I hate doing things I don't want to do. That was really actionable. Honestly, all of the presentations were you walked away and you were like, oh wait, I can implement video into my onboarding and all I need to do is this one thing when I get back. It was just, it was great.
Nice. Kristi, what is Dave's CS 5.0 vision?
I'm going to send you a link to go read his article that he wrote on it a couple months ago. It's long, it's lengthy, but basically it's kind of the future state. He kind of talks to the evolution of customer success in its early day being, reactive, which was through the lens of support, all the way through then kind of moving to this proactive motion and this kind of valued outcomes into this future state that he sees it at, including AI, right? And so this kind of led with you need humans as the kind of, I don't want to say the driver of all this, but from an empathy and relationship standpoint, but how the future will be the evolution of AI and technology to kind of power us to be the best versions of ourselves, to drive efficiency and productivity and all of this stuff. So it kind of just talks about it through that lens of the evolution of all these stages of customer success. But I'll send you the link.
No,
and maybe you could put the link that was here.
Can I have those 20 seconds of my life back? There was
what?
nothing informative or educational about
because
what
I'm
you
not
just
here
described.
to read the article to you. Go read the article. It's a plug for that.
I have a lot of
read
faith in you, and it's your birthday. I figured you'd be on top of things, but okay. Arit, tell us about your
I'm too busy opening all the presents from all my other friends, Josh, that don't include you.
Mine's in the mail. Arit, tell us about your presentation.
So I talked about using AI, specifically ChatGPT, to do capacity planning and modeling for my team, which is actually something I did because I was banging my head against the wall and don't like spreadsheets. I honestly think the biggest takeaway from the conference might be Arit hates spreadsheets. I think I said that 87 times, hate them, which is a funny thing for a CS leader that has to work in spreadsheets to say. But basically I talked about how I leveraged ChatGPT to solve a problem, not just for my team, but for me as a leader. And I think one of the things that we end up doing as CS leaders in particular is we are so team focused, which we should be, right? Our job is to advocate for our team, to make sure that they're successful, to make sure they have everything they need, they're enabled, they feel empowered. Those are all amazing things. What I think it does though, is sometimes it leads out a little bit of burnout on the leadership side, where you're like, okay, but I have all these things I need to do and I've optimized stuff for my team, but like, how do I make my life easier in reporting and capacity planning and modeling and things that are absolutely critical for a leader in CS to be good at and get right, but take a lot of time and a lot of energy, and are the things that you don't necessarily want to prioritize that over time with your team coaching or time with your team strategizing on a big renewal. You want to be able to do that stuff, get it done, feel good about it, present it, have the strategy, and like then go back to your other tactical things. And so it was kind of the idea of how can we pull these tools down as leaders and use them to push forward some of the objectives that are going to help us and our team, but to take some of that stuff off of our plate.
Awesome. I mean, I love the story of your using ChatGPT under your own initiative to do capacity planning and to give OpenAI all that information and data about your company and to do.
I anonymized the data.
She did talk
amazing.
about
Cool.
how she anonymized it.
Yeah.
I even made sure I talked about her anonymizing it in my use cases.
Yeah.
Because what I did is I replaced all the customer names and any data about our customers, and I replaced it and I mapped it. So like the first customer was customer A, B, C, D, and I kind of just used it all the way through like ZZ. Like just I assigned a letter attribute to the customer name. So when I looked at the recommendations and the data and insights, I just mapped it back.
Yeah,
I'm just joshing you. Listen,
are you just joshing us?
I'm just joshing you. I have to be in a position to be very strict and very like serious about data, privacy, and compliance and everything. But at the end of the day, OpenAI doesn't give a shit about your
yes,
CS specialists.
Yes,
they might. We're very important. I think OpenAI cares about us personally.
Yeah. Okay.
Just Josh doesn't.
Okay. No, I do. I think it's a very serious topic for all my prospects listening out there. So, Kristi, anything else? This has been an awesome 10.5-minute unpaid plug for CS100. Any other question I didn't ask before we ask Arit about her role at Searchspring?
No, let's keep it moving, because honestly, anybody who cares can go and listen to or go find people on LinkedIn.
Chris is going to send you the link from Dave Blake's recap.
I'll send you the link to recaps on all of the speakers and all the wonderful stuff at CS100. No, I'm just super thrilled, Josh, that you actually facilitated the introduction, because I had a great time with Arit last week. I wish you could have been there too. I think you would have really enjoyed yourself. So I am grateful for the introduction. She added so much value to our event, and we're grateful.
Awesome. And any other last birthday updates you want to share with us? Like,
I'm old. 42. I'm tired. I was really banking on that 17-minute nap. Didn't get it. Thanks.
Oh, sorry. Arit, tell us what's going on with Searchspring. Tell us a little bit about your role. You are the Senior Director of Customer Success. You're based in Chicago. Tell us a little bit first about the company, and then we can jump into a little bit about your role in the org that you work with.
Yeah, so Searchspring is an e-commerce search and merchandising solution and personalization for like e-commerce brands and retailers. So if you have a website, maybe you build it on Shopify, when you like search for something on that website, our software is what powers the search. And there's a lot that goes into actually like surfacing relevant search results. Who knew? So there's like algorithms and AI and all this stuff that goes into actually like surfacing that. And so that's primarily what our customers are using us for. There's also personalization. So if a customer like comes to your site from a specific geography, maybe you show them coats versus if they live in a warm climate, you're showing them, tank tops, right? So it allows us to like basically empower merchandisers and people who are running e-commerce sites to like create a really good customer experience so customers can find what they need quickly.
Awesome. How big's the company? How long they've been around? What's your ARR? What's your ACV? No, I'm just joking. But tell us a little bit about the 411 about the company.
I was like, oh my God, when was Searchspring founded? I'm like a terrible person. I can't even think of the name because it's been acquired a couple times. That's not my fault. That's acquisition's fault.
Okay.
But 2011-ish, I think, is when it was originally founded. So it's about 13 years old, roughly. So it's not like startup, but we've gone through a couple of like strategic acquisitions. Both we were acquired twice, and then we've also acquired other companies. So it's one of those companies that is like, not in a bad way, but almost like a Frankenstein's monster. Like if things had not gone awry with Frankenstein's monster, like that's what you get when you like add things on to a company. Now you have this thing to sell because we acquired this company. So, the usual kind of SaaS eating SaaS kind of a vibe.
Yeah.
But right now we have about, I think total with the newest acquisition, we're at around 270 employees globally. So my team is about 15 in terms of CSMs, CS managers, program managers, which is like a new role for us. And I've got folks in the US, primarily based in Denver and San Antonio. And then we have a team in Australia that leads our APAC business as well. So we also have folks in EMEA that will eventually roll up to the CS org here, but that's like a very new acquisition. So that's kind of the vibe of our team. We're broken down with like scale, digital experience, SMB, and enterprise.
Cool. Awesome. What's a big rock that you're pushing uphill these days?
Oh my God. I wish there was like one big rock. Wouldn't that be nice? If it was just the one.
Give it all to us.
I think the biggest thing for us has been like laser focused on getting good at predicting risk in our customer base. We're in a really unique position because we work in e-commerce, and e-commerce has gone through quite a lot of change. A lot of industries have, but not quite like e-commerce, right? Like 2019, they were cruising along. Maybe 15% of sales come from like globally are going to our e-commerce sales. People really shopped in person a lot. Pandemic hit. Suddenly all of these e-commerce sites, just like a lot of other industries, saw huge booms because no one could shop in person. And then now our customers are seeing that kind of re-leveling out, which doesn't feel like leveling out. It feels like we're losing now, when actually it was just like an arbitrary 2.5-year blip. And so what we're doing is trying to get a better understanding of like where our customers sit in this arc. Like, where do they sit? What are their businesses doing? What are their new priorities now that they've gone through this huge boom, had to adjust to it, and then are experiencing now what they're seeing as a decline, but is really just like relatively on par in terms of growth with what they would have seen in 2019. And so it's a very interesting time. And so because of that, we're reestablishing like, how do we actually calculate our customers' risk? Like, if we're thinking about a health score, like what are the real indicators that customers are maybe looking for another solution, or that customers are ripe to buy something else. And so we've had to kind of reevaluate all of that. That's probably the biggest rock, is just making sure we're laser focused on identifying risk in advance and then being able to take action on it once we actually are able to identify the risk.
So can you double click into that for us? Like, how are you identifying it? What are the different vectors of identification, categories that you're identifying, that sort of thing?
Yeah. So we used to identify risk based off of like, oh, like we've got the data and like, this doesn't look right. But we're seeing that even with the data looking good, like even if a customer is like, for all intent and purposes, hitting all the benchmarks that we would establish that like would indicate a healthy customer, that doesn't necessarily tell us how well their business is doing. And so what we've realized is that we need to know really deeper than we have before, how a customer's business is actually faring, like financially, like from black and white, like, are they in the red? Are they black? Like, what's going on? Because some of them have experienced such a drop that they're like, oh crap, we have to get rid of something. Like we literally can't support it anymore. And some of them are not. So that's actually required much more manual. I've been moving much toward like in the past 5 years, automation, understanding like from a high level, looking at all the data as like a whole thing, what's rising to the top. And we've actually had to pull back a little bit and just like cross-section our customer base by certain attributes that we've identified. So like certain industries in e-commerce, certain platforms in e-commerce, certain regions in e-commerce that typically before wouldn't have been like a huge indicator of risk, but now they are. And so diving into what those are and then figuring out, okay, in this vertical in e-commerce, what are the challenges they're experiencing? How can we understand what those are? Identifying them more manually and then finding ways to put them into an automation so that we don't have to continually do it manually. So it's been much more actually like taking a step back from a perspective of like our health scores they didn't make any sense, to what actually matters. And let's manually, like things like reviewing calls and Gong and like listening to sales calls to find out what kind of problems customers are talking about now versus when we sold them a year and a half ago. So those are the kinds of things that we're doing. It's much more manual, which then of course will hopefully feed into something automated in the future.
How are you using the data that you're getting from the conversations you're having with customers? Like, how are you parsing through that? Because one of the things that I do not enjoy is going back to listen to calls or listen to conversations. So I don't have time for that either, right? I don't have time to be on the call and I don't have time to go back and listen to it. So how are you parsing through that information, and what are the signals that you're looking for to indicate risk?
Basically what we're doing is we've modified the way the CSMs log risk when they identify it. So we did enablement on like, here are some of the things that we need you to be paying attention to. These are the risk factors. They used to be this, now they're this. Let's focus here. When they identify those, it's manual. Like we use our CS tool. We put a note in the CS tool. We like make sure we know that it's actually happening. And then we can either export that. And I know, Kristi, your face is exactly
my face is, for those listening and not watching, I'm uncomfortable because you're talking about very manual things.
So much manual right now is what's happening, just because some of the indicators that we've like noticed aren't things that are going to show up in like usage data, right? Like they just aren't. So we have to dig into the customer, take note of it. We classify it, right? There's like buckets of
what are some things, like what's examples of some of those things that come up?
So e-commerce platform is one of them. Previously, that wasn't the thing we like paid as much attention to. We knew what they were on because like some of them integrated better than others, but we're like platform agnostic. But now one of the e-commerce platforms, for example, that we have a good chunk of customers in, they've developed a competitor solution, right? In-house. That's free. So that changes things. Whereas previously, these customers that were on like the most streamlined integration we could offer are suddenly being presented with a potential for not the same at all, right? It's like definitely not the same functionality, but it's enough that they're like, oh, maybe this might be an interesting thing. So that's something we weren't paying attention to before. We were tracking it, but not as a risk metric. We had other e-commerce platforms as a risk metric, and now those aren't as risky because there's not an internal competitor living there. There's more technical challenge, which we can manage because we've been doing that for years. So that's one example. Another might be, we're seeing a lot of changes in like team restructuring. And funny enough, AI, where like customers in our industry, and I don't know if this is true for other industries, I've heard it a little bit, they're asking for more and more AI solutions for us to deliver to them. And so that's another thing when customers start to ask about AI, start to dig deeper, specific questions about it. Customers are always like, what innovation do you have? But there's some signals when you hear a customer asking about the roadmap that you know that their expectation is that you're going to deliver something, even because they've heard it in the market that it might exist. And so, but if follow up, every time a customer is like, what are you doing with AI? And I respond, I'm like, what particularly are you looking to solve for? Like, I have not once gotten a response to that. Like, they don't know, they just know it exists. Right? Like that's
100% of the time.
Yeah.
Because like, they need to check their boxes that their tech stack has AI, but like, what does that even mean? What are you solving for? The breadth and depth of the responses, I agree with you. It's so shallow. Nobody knows what they want. They just know that they want something to be a better experience and to help them, but they don't know what they're seeking help around or what their expectations are around how your technology will even provide that.
100%.
I think that's going to lighten up, by the way. I think at first you had people like senior executives saying, okay, what are we doing with AI? Like what's our strategy and approach here? And that was putting pressure on leadership to go out there and explore what's out there. And I think now people understand that it's not the AI that you need to look for. It's, again, what's the problem, like you said? And then potentially AI is something that helps that problem.
Exactly. Yeah. Because sometimes the problem they're having, we're like, oh, we do that. You just need to do it this way. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, everybody, it's Josh. I'm taking a quick break from the podcast to tell you a bit about UpdateAI. I started UpdateAI to solve two major challenges for CS teams. The first is that we save CSMs 4 to 5 hours per week with our productivity through AI. Secondly, we give leaders a window into all the conversations across each account and the entire portfolio. So we help knowledge transfer, we help increase the coverage model of your CS teams, and we help you detect emerging patterns in what your customers are telling your CSMs across all the risks, product feedback, advocacy moments, and expansion opportunities. So come check us out at www.updateai. It's completely free to sign up and trial. Okay, so where were we? Sometimes things come up that product usage data does not otherwise track.
Yeah.
And Kristi, you were asking about how do you take what you hear from the customers and be able to synthesize that into more proactive types of actions, right?
Like how do you scale that? Because I mean, to your point, like right now you guys are doing everything very manual. I can't imagine having to listen for specific words or things that are coming up in conversations, manually track that, and then synthesize it into a program that your team can execute against and understand across your book, where is there real risk versus like, where is there maybe long-term risk, but like, where is it imminent and where is it long-term maybe?
Yeah. No, it's painful. It's painful. And also in parts of it, like having to do it manually, it reminds me of like when I was a CSM, the stuff that I had to do as a CSM back in the day, right? Like there weren't tools like this when I started as a CSM. I literally just had to intimately know every single one of my accounts, and I didn't have small books of business. And that's not really the expectation. It should be, but it's not as much anymore because we've given so many tools. And so if you're a CSM, if I'm a CSM today, like frankly, it feels like a very crowded situation where your mandate is like, know your customers, identify risk, work to show value, like get them to renew and expand, like generally speaking. But you're given like sometimes 5 or 6 different tools, right? You're like, customer marketing is sending this, and then you've got your customer success tool doing this, and then you've got office hours, you have a newsletter, you have a community. There's so many things that a CSM is like supported by that I think in some ways it's caused a little bit of atrophy because they haven't had to stay on top of stuff in the same way they had before. So me having to go in and do this manual stuff, I was like, oh dang, like this is like when I was a CSM. Like, look at that. It's like come full circle. I don't want to keep doing it. Like I'd like to solve it, but like at least I'm like learning a lot. And like, I'm like, oh, this is taking a lot of time. It is.
Since you've started this, do you feel like you have a better handle on the book?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's also like context wise, it's important. Like I've only been at Searchspring less than a year, right? And so doing something like this in your first year at a company is always going to be a net positive because you're going to have to learn the business in a different way when you're diving this deep into certain things and then figuring out what actions you need to take that are actually going to move the needle. I mean, we've identified a few of these and we've just been trying stuff, right? That's what you do. You identify risk. You're like, okay, this is a new risk profile. I hadn't seen this before. What kinds of things would de-risk the situation? And you just try them, right? We've tried, there's one risk factor we identified that we have tried literally 4 different types of things. When this shows up, nothing worked. And then last week we saved a customer using the 5th thing we tried. And I was like, did we find something? Did this work? Like what's happening? It's just like, there's so much more experimentation now than I think has previously even been necessary because your customers have so many tools that they're using. I mean, they just do. No matter where you are, they have so many tools. So you just have to get good at iterating.
Yeah. By the way, the challenge that you talked about a second ago around how during COVID there was more, commerce that was helping you guys grow faster, and now it's like back to normal. I think that's something that resonates with a lot of people out there. I mean, we spoke to Daniel Silverstein. He's the SVP of post sales at Carta last week. And you can imagine in his space, it's been a completely topsy-turvy world where, he was riding those 2020, 2021 highs. And then all of a sudden, like we're in a downturn. So I think there's a lot of folks out there that are trying to figure that piece out.
Yep, for sure.
Kristi, go for it.
Yeah, I want to go back. I'm going to go backwards a little bit and then we can go forwards again. So how did your team respond to this? So you gave your team a manual project to go sink their teeth into, right? And you're very clear on the why we're doing this, but I have to understand, like, how did your team respond? Because I've given my team a bunch of stuff to do and nobody ever likes me. I'm no one's friend. I'm no one,
That's a good question.
So how did you manage the people part of this change and this project?
I will say there's a couple things that were on my side in the situation. One, being a new leader. So like they expected some change to come. And 2, and this isn't good, but there have been a lot of huge sweeping changes to how CS is run at Searchspring since I joined. Like, so this kind of almost blended in with the other things where I was like, pay attention to what these things are. And I need you to put a note and do this thing, Like, I don't think this felt like a huge additional lift in many ways because what was previously asked of them was also quite manual, was not necessarily like taken. They didn't do the connect the dots as to like, we need you to do this maybe annoying thing, but also here's why, like these are the whys behind it. So I do a lot of reminding of why, but like really when I joined, just because of all of the change that had happened, there were no CS tiers, right? There was no deciding what customer goes where, what service they get. None of that existed before I came. Like, there's a lot of stuff that has fundamentally changed about the whole department. And so this isn't really, luckily, hasn't been like, oh, you're asking us to do this other manual thing, because the other manual stuff they had to do was like, figure out when this account renews because our Salesforce data is bad, right? Like,
oh, wow.
Yeah. So this was like, oh, okay, this is like for a purpose. Like this felt, I think, a little different. At least I hope it does, unless they're all lying to me and like they're low key like, I hate Arit. Like,
which, like, listen, as leaders, we have to be okay with that too, right? Sometimes our teams will not like the things we ask them to do, but we have to do them.
Yeah.
So let's just do it and hopefully things get better. Okay. I'm just always curious because I hate tasking my team with doing things. Not more than they hate being tasked with them, but
yeah, but it sucks, especially for a CS team. Like they're probably getting asked to do stuff from other other parts of the company. Ask CSMs to do crap all the time, right? So you're just piling on.
Is that true at Client Success, Kristi? Do other parts of the company ask you guys to do stuff all the time? I feel like you probably like hold your ground over there.
Well, let's put it this way. Like they have to ask for permission before, like they can't just go to my team and start making demands and putting things on their plate at all. That is never going to be acceptable when I'm a leader in any organization. But I am a business leader before I am a CS leader. Yeah. And so because of that, there are things that I have to partner with our cross-functional peers on, right? Whether it is marketing, whether it is sales, whether it's product. And there are things that I just know have to be done because it's good for the business, right? Yeah. Whether it's helping us drive our roadmap and we need to engage with customers. And so we need to be capturing different things about their tech stack or their needs or use cases or things like that. Yes, that's going to be more work for my team, but it's additional work with a very clear purpose. And so long as we understand the overarching business impact of the work that we're tasking them to do, I'm on board with it. What I'm not on board with is like the busy work because some other team is trying to like scramble and get something done. And so now it's all like, well, CSMs go do da. And like, no, that's never okay. But if you come with a very clear purpose around this and it's a business initiative that we're all as leaders behind, then absolutely I'm going to get my teams and my resources on board with it. It just has to be how we communicate it, because I tell my team all the time, I want change to happen with them, not to them. And I think that is important. I think it's important to distinguish that. So as long as my team feels like they're coming along and this is part of something that they feel like is in their control because they understand the why, then I'm okay with it. I don't like people dictating to my team what they should be doing with their time, given that their time is limited.
There are two real juicy quotes in that. I love that. You want your team to have change with them, not to them.
Not to them.
And then you're a business leader first and a CS leader second. I love those. That's great.
Yeah. And I think both are important, and both are things that I had to learn the hard way. I will say that. If you want to be an executive,
tell us the story behind the hard way.
Oh, okay. All right. So my old leadership style was like, my team is never wrong. My team will always be my number one priority. Like my team.
It was like Long Island meets Latina CS leader.
Yeah, basically. Yes. Yeah, like this Latina, half Italian, half Puerto Rican girl was like very territorial, like not in my sandbox, not today, get out. You're wrong. My team's always right. They are the best. And even if I thought they were wrong, I would never admit that to anybody else, right? Like it was only like in private we would talk about this. But what I learned really quickly is that my focus on my team doing the things that served us limited our ability to drive organizational impact. And I also learned very quickly that I wasn't making friends of my cross-functional peers. And we just weren't working the way that we should to drive the business forward. So I had to learn how to just take a step back and think about the business instead of just my team, and understanding that if I was focused on the business, my team and their needs and the impact that they should be driving would kind of fall in line with that. So the higher I moved in my career, as I moved from like director to VP and then VP to C-level at Client Success, I very much had to change my mindset about that. The second one though, I used to be very much like I've decided all of these things and here you're just going to go do it with my team, and a very bad leader in the sense that I never gave people context and I always just gave orders. And the resistance there is very clear, right? Like, because nobody likes the way that feels, especially when you have mature professionals who are experienced on your team. Many of my team members have been leaders themselves at other organizations, and the expectation is that they're treated like children, right? Like they joined this because they wanted to be a part of something bigger, where they had impact, where they had a say, where their voice was heard. And so I learned very quickly that if I wanted to have a high impact team where everyone was bought in, I need to be working with them. And so bringing them into the process and making them feel like they were part of what we were doing, and this was a joint endeavor, whatever it was, I got buy-in a lot faster and the change happened more organically. I'm a hero.
Arit, what's the number one request that you get at Searchspring from other cross functions for your team?
Oh gosh, number one request. That's a really good question. We get requests to jump in pre-sales for like more high impact deals. So we get requests for that, which I'm not opposed to. Like I used to have a process for this at other companies where once it hit a certain deal stage, like you had the right to pull in a CSM that was going to own the account post-sale over a certain MRR. So we get requests from that. We request from product a lot.
And you get a cut of commission on that too, right?
Come on, Josh.
Sorry.
That's what Amy's commission.
I'm in a needling mood today and every day.
That doesn't happen. We get a lot of requests from product because we've been doing a lot of product roadmap changes and innovation in the last year, which every SaaS company has, but we've really changed our product roadmap significantly. And so lots of requests for customer feedback, for beta program participation, for customer survey responses, things like that have come up a lot. And there's just general, our CSMs, we are in a good position where our CSMs really are the product experts, and some of them are the most tenured at the company. And so honestly, nice. I've actually had to intervene because I'm also I learned the hard way too that I needed to be more cross-functional because I would so mama bear my team all the time. And then I was like, okay, nobody wants to talk to me because they're scared to ask me for anything because they think the answer is going to be no all the time, which sometimes it is fine. But I realized that they need to be able to jump in and help sometimes because they do have so much institutional knowledge. So that was one thing that is kind of actually unique a little bit to Searchspring, where the CSMs have been at the company for quite some time. And so there are times where their slacks are insane. If I talk to one of my senior CSMs and I'm like, how many people do you answer on Slack every day internally that need something? And I finally was like, stop it. You have to stop it. People have to learn to fish. And so that was one of the biggest time sucks is individual CSMs. So not going through me to partner with a cross-functional project, but reaching out to the enterprise CSM directly because you know that they probably have your answer, which I don't want to stop that because I try to think of it as we're a remote company, but if you're in an office, you might walk up to the CSM and be like, hey, had a question. I don't want to kill that. That's important. That's a part of cross-functional team building. But it happens a lot where you can't, in the remote world, you can't see that everyone else is doing the same thing as you. And so half of the day of this enterprise CSM is spent answering questions for other team members.
All right, I got a question on that. So are the questions about a specific customer that person is managing, or is it about the product or process or things like that more general where somebody else could answer it?
Oh, it's the latter a lot of the time, which is what.
So then why don't you have the questions go to a channel and just kind of put the kibosh on the direct one-to-one?
They will go in a channel, but sometimes they go one-to-one. So it's there's this thing that people post in a channel, and if they don't get an answer fast enough, they message directly, right?
I'm that guy.
And I'm like,
yes, you definitely are, Josh. You're so bad.
I'm all for it. I get it. And it's funny because I do it too. I'll be like, someone needs to answer this question for me. Please, I'm the number one priority. But it just knowing that it takes on average, 25, 30 minutes to get back on task, and knowing that we're looking at risk in a different way. We have all these new initiatives and programs and other things. Think tiny stuff that takes away energy from your team. It's death by 1,000 cuts for sure.
Arit, did you include that in your capacity modeling?
Oh my God. I included ad hoc Slack. That was literally
Did you?
what I told you. Yeah. I told you because I wanted to get a sense of what they were actually doing with their time and what they needed to be doing with their time.
Right.
And
I didn't know, I couldn't remember if the Slack, because I know you talked about internal meetings and you talked about all this other stuff. I didn't realize that Slack was in there. Okay.
Ad hoc Slack. I put internal meetings. I put email as answering emails or whatever, but ad hoc Slack, some of them would put multiple hours of in that category of things that they were. And I was just
that's wild.
Yeah.
That's because we don't think about that, right? When we think about all the time and where everyone's time is going, but a couple hours a week in a 40, in a typical 40-hour, we'll say 50-hour work week. That's crazy.
Yeah. That's time you could be doing all kinds of other more impactful things. Or I don't know, taking a little nap, right?
17-minute nap.
Exactly.
Highly encouraged.
We're going to leave it there, everybody. Great episode. Arit, it was so great to have you on the show. So great to have you at CS100, even though I was not there. I'm sure it sounds like it was an amazing session that you led.
Her session will be recorded and shared. So for anyone who wants to hear more about her capacity planning, we will have that up on YouTube soon.
Oh, wonderful. That's great.
Yeah.
I want to see it.
Yeah. It was so great.
Yeah. And Kristi, have a wonderful, happiest of birthdays.
Oh, I will. Thank you, Josh.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.